This time we're going to make this handy drawstring pouch. It's quite a simple make, but it's good fun as well, and it's something a little bit different. But I think the best thing is the size of it. So although it may not look too big here, when I open this up, you'll see that it is in effect, whoops, quite a large storage box that happens to have a drawstring around the top. So this could be somewhere where you keep all of your sewing notions or your knitting bits and bobs at the side of your sewing machine, and then when you're finished for the day you can simply draw this up and maybe hang it on the back of a door for great storage as well. Now I've put all of the materials and your cutting instructions in the description box underneath the video, so go and choose your fabrics and we'll get sewing. So these are my 5 9-inch square pieces of fabric for the outer, and I've already fused some H640, a fusible fleece, onto the wrong side of this to give the bag a little bit of rigidity. I've also got 5 of the lining pieces, which are again same size, 9-inch square, and my length of ribbon. And to make the little channels for the ribbon to go through, this is the larger piece of fabric which we're going to sew together first of all. So just pop those out of the way, and we'll take this piece with the long sides right side together, just sew down this piece here, and I'm just using the edge of my foot as a seam allowance, so it's around about 1/4 inch, maybe just a little bit over. Then we'll turn this the right side out and give it a press. So I'll just bring up my ironing mat and I'm going to press it with the seam straight down the centre. It doesn't really matter whether the seam's open or not, so this will just be pressed to one side, which is fine. And then we're going to cut this into pieces. So again, this is going to make the channels that go around the top of the bag to feed the ribbon through. Okay, then we'll fold this in half to find the centre, and I'm going to cut this in half. You could use your rotary cutter, ruler and mat if you prefer, but this is quite simple to cut this way. And then we're going to fold each one of these in half and cut again. So I'll have 4 equal sized pieces. And this one. And cut. And then each one of these I'm going to fold in half again with the raw edges together and the seam on the inside, and we'll just give those a quick press as well. So raw edges and press. Then we'll take our 4 outer pieces, and if you have a directional fabric, make sure they're facing the right direction. So this is the top, and these are going to be centered in the top of each one of the pieces. So if you take your ruler, or if you have this on a cutting mat, and just make sure that they're sitting around about 2 inches from each side. And I'll just put a few clips in there. And sew close to the edge across the top, so within the seam allowance, and we'll need to do this on all 4 pieces. Then these pieces are all going to be sewn right sides together along the side edges. So pop these 2 pieces together, starting at the top and stopping 1/4 inch from the bottom, or whatever the seam allowance is. So mine is the width of my foot. I'm going to stop the width of the foot from the bottom, so I've got an open piece at the bottom here. And I think this is going to help you when we put the base in, because that can be a little bit confusing sometimes. So let's reverse at the top and stitch all the way down. And And again, when we get to, you don't have to measure it exactly, but when we get to the same distance from the bottom, that's where I'm going to stop. So again, that little bit's open at the bottom. And we'll do the same with all 4 pieces until we've joined them together to make a box shape. Then we'll take the base piece and we're going to sew this in place, but line up the edge of the fabric with the edge of the piece that you're going to sew it to, so it overlaps the seam slightly. Okay, it's very tempting to put this right into the corner and then start to sew, but it's not going to match. You need to have that overlap of the seam allowance. So let's match that up. If you wanted to pin that in place first of all, then that's absolutely fine. I'm not going to with this one, but you'll see the actual fabric pieces are matching the base and the side pieces and overlapping at both ends. So we're going to sew from inside where the seam allowance was. So I'm creating in effect a Y seam at the bottom here, and we'll sew all the way across and stop again just at the seam allowance on this side. Now I do find it easier to start halfway through or halfway along the panel. But again, if you want to pin that all the way around, it's fine. When I'm coming up to the corner here, I can feel where that seam is. So I'm going to stop with the needle down, lift the foot up, and then manoeuvre this around so that the seams are matching. This is why personally I find it easier not to pin. So again, seams are matching down this edge now, or the raw edges are matching, sorry. I want to come down to this end, that will overlap the seam in the corner. So let's again match that up, foot down, and sew. And again, I'm going to stop just when I reach the seam underneath there. Stop with the needle down again, lift the foot up, push everything out of the way from underneath where you're stitching, line up these edges again, foot down, and sew. This may seem quite bulky on this side, but ignore that. We're concentrating on what's happening underneath the needle. So as long as there isn't any of this lumpy fabric underneath your presser foot, because that would mean you're going to get little creases and puckers in it. So we need to keep this stitch line nice and neat and clear. So back into the final corner. Oops, the third corner I should say. Turn around and line up the edges. This is the final corner, so again as I'm approaching, stop with the needle down, lift it up, push the bulk out of the way and carry on to meet where I started sewing. So that's the base sewn in. So let's just turn this the right side out and make sure that I'm happy with the corners at this point. If you've missed anything, if you haven't joined all of those 3 seams up together in the corner, then you can go back over it again if you need to. But that's looking nice and neat. So then we'll put this to one side, and we need to sew the 5 lining pieces together in just the same way. So 4 side pieces to make the box, to make the tube shape, and then the one in the bottom. This time I'm going to leave a turning gap in one of the sides of around about 4 or 5 inches, enough so that I can get my hand inside. So make up exactly the same way. The only difference is that turning gap. Then with the lining inside out and the outer bag right side out, we're going to put the outer bag inside the lining, and this means that the right sides are together. I'm going to match up the seams at the side, and I will pop a clip in there at each corner just to make sure they meet. Not worried about seams being pressed open to one side or anything. I don't think it matters around here, and I'm just going to actually squish those in opposite directions just to cut down on the bulk a little bit when we get to the corners. But I don't think that's particularly important. There's my turning gap in the side. And again, match up the seam. And then the final piece here. And then we'll sew all the way around the top. So just make sure that these channels are tucked inside as you come to them. And we'll sew all the way around. Now if you have a free arm on your sewing machine, then you may want to take off the accessory compartment and sew that way. Otherwise, just sew from the inside like this. That's quite simple. Then we'll turn the whole thing the right side out through the turning gap which we left here. And have your iron at the ready because we're going to need to press this. So let's pull the whole thing through. With the gap at the side, I'm just going to put my fingers inside the gap and pull each side away from each other, and you should find that the side of the fabric folds inwards, and then we'll sew straight across to close the opening. Then let's push the lining inside the bag, and I'll just bring up the ironing board again. And I'm going to press around the top of it before we top stitch. What I'm also going to do while I'm here is to pinch the seams across the sides and the base, and I'm just going to press those as well to encourage it to keep its shape. And in fact, if you wanted to make that a little bit stronger, then a little bit of spray starch or best press just over the seams will help to hold that, and that'll help to keep its boxy appearance, shall we say. So a little bit of spray on here again. Do that all the seams actually, and pinch along the seam and press it. And we'll do that with all of the side seams and around the bottom seam as well. A bit more spray on here, and then just keep pressing, and then we will top stitch around there as well. But you can see already this is starting to take a really nice boxy kind of shape. It's great for storage, a bag like this, because there is so much room in it. You know, you've got a 9-inch square, 8.5-inch square box at the end of the day, so it's great for storage. But by having the drawstring around the top, it also means that it'll keep things dust free. And of course, if you're travelling, you can just draw this up and take it with you. So it's like a portable storage box. So again, just going around those bottom seams. Don't have to do this, but it does give it a nice crisp finish, I think. So almost done there. One last one here. And then back to the machine, and I'm going to just sew all the way around the top. So quite close to the edge. You can lengthen the stitch a little bit here if you like. Again, I'm sewing from the inside, but if you wanted to use the free arm on your sewing machine, then that may be an easier option for you. I've just got a loose thread here that I need to snip away. Don't know where they come from. And just sew all the way around. Just keep the lining nice and taut away from the seam at the top so it doesn't pucker up. And I'm just using actually the inside of the my presser foot as a guide to where I'm stitching. So I'm running this against the edge of the seam. But if you're not too confident in top stitching, if you have a foot with a gauge on it, or a guide on it, sorry, like a blind hem foot, sometimes an over edge foot, then you can use that guide to help you sew it in a straight line. A little bit lumpy going over the seams at the sides, so take your time over those. If your machine doesn't cope with the thickness very well, then you can always turn the hand wheel by hand as you come to the thicker seams, or try using a denim needle on your sewing machine. They're stronger needles, so they're designed, like that one, to go through the thicker layers of fabric easily. Right, so that's how we're looking there. So the final thing to do is to thread the ribbon around there. So I need 2 pieces to go in opposite directions, and they will be the circumference and a little bit more of your box. So remember, all the measurements will be in the description box underneath the video. There we go. Then I'll need a safety pin or some kind of bodkin or something to thread the ribbon through. I'd use a safety pin for this one. And the way. So we'll go in one direction with the first ribbon, and then the opposite direction with the second ribbon. So the ties are going to end up at 2 corners of the bag, 2 opposite corners of the bag. So through you go. It's quite quick to make as well, isn't it? And you could make this in lots of different sizes. If you wanted the sides to be taller, as long as the base is square, you could make the sides a lot taller. So if you used maybe a 5-inch square instead of a 9-inch square, you can make a different, smaller matching little pouch as well. So just come to the end here, and I'm just going to tie those 2, whoops, the ribbon's gone, together in a knot at the end. And if you cut those off at a diagonal, helps to stop your ribbon from fraying. And then the second piece of ribbon will go through the opposite side, so the ends are at opposite sides of the box. Let's just thread this through this way. See, cord would look nice as well. You don't have to use ribbons, so depending on what kind of fabric you're using, maybe you're making this out of something that's a little bit more rustic, then maybe even string would work really well. And if you're using a cotton piping cord, that can be dyed. So you could dye it to the same colour as your fabric if you can't find exactly what you want colour-wise. Right, almost done here. There you go, so take that off. And again, tie up the ends. Snip off at an angle. And we're finished. So I think it's quite fun to make. It's very quick to make. Something a little bit different as well that I hope you're going to find useful and enjoy making as well. I'll see you next time.